The first meeting is really a get-to-know-you meeting. We're going to sit down. Typically, the meeting will last about an hour. We're having a conversation. My job is to ask them some questions about where they are, what some of their goals are, what some of the key objectives they have in meeting with me, where they are to this point, and really what brought them in to see me. And now I'm at the point in my career where I have a lot of people that are dependent upon me to provide them with all the guidance and all the advice that we do on a day-to-day basis.
You spend your working years trying to build up your assets, trying to build up pension credits at your job, trying to grow your nest egg so that you can one day retire when you can't work or don't want to work anymore. And that's a period followed by phase two, which is retirement. And your priorities in these two phases are very different, but many times we see people don't make that shift and they still act like they're in phase one when they really should be acting like they're in phase two.
We're going to talk to you about what we commonly refer to as the second half of the game. And what I mean by that is you're working your entire life towards retirement, and I'm assuming that most of you are, at that age where you're starting to consider some of your options as you move into retirement. And as you do that, you're moving from what we call the accumulation phase of your life, where you're accumulating your assets. Maybe you're participating in your company's 401k, maybe you're contributing to an IRA account or a Roth IRA account or some type of retirement vehicle. And now, as you retire, you're transitioning into the distribution phase, or the part where you're going to need income in retirement. So we're going to talk about some different ways to do that with an emphasis on Social Security.
Hello and welcome to Financially Speaking with Jeff Bush. Today we're going to play what we call the what if game. We're going to give our viewers a chance to think about what might happen when faced with the unexpected. So today, Jeff, I'm going to ask you some tough questions and talk about how you as an advisor, how do you handle that with your clients? How do you plan for that? Planning for the unexpected.
Well, first of all, Barry, welcome to the show. It's great to be here again for another exciting edition of Financially Speaking. And, as financial advisors, we always plan for the worst and hope for the best. We don't live in a perfect world, and I think everybody understands that. While you may not be able to account for all the different possible scenarios, addressing the what-ifs in life is a great way to start with your planning.
Sure. And well, I guess start with the most fundamental. You pass away tomorrow. What happens? How is that handled?
Okay. Well, what if you die tomorrow? Okay. Would your spouse and your family have enough assets to live on? That's the most basic question. Will your assets be distributed in the way you would like them to be? And of course, that gets into the whole question of your will and your beneficiary designations. So, do you even have a will? We find a lot of people that come into our office don't even have a basic will. But also with retirement accounts, life insurance policies, annuities, those assets are passed by the beneficiary designations. So are your beneficiary designations current? Is the money going to go to the people that the people that you love?
And that's a good point. I remember reading a case where a woman went to work as a school teacher in her 20s, and she was single, and she listed her mother and her sister as her beneficiary. And she worked in the schools for 30, 40 years and moved up the channel, became a principal, and administrator. So she made some very serious money. And this is a New York case. She died, and between when she went to work and when she died, she had married. But she never changed her beneficiary designations on her IRAs or 403B, her retirement accounts. Yep. And also what happened was her mother passed away, and her sister and her stopped speaking. So the one person that she really cared about and would want to benefit was her husband. Now what happened to the husband?
Well, the husband, in that case that you're referring to, the husband was actually cut out because he was never named as the beneficiary. So the estranged sister, so to speak, inherited. And this was a case where there was $1 million at stake. She had $1 million pension, and the husband fought it, but he lost because it was in black and white that the sister was the beneficiary. So we want to make sure you have your proper beneficiary designations along with having a current will. And also there's the issue of taxes too. So in the planning process, we always as you stated before, you begin with the end in mind, and there's no further end than death.
Yeah. So if any of our listeners or our viewers out there, oftentimes we feel, well, once you sign on the dotted line and you've bought life insurance, well, that's it, you're done. But the reality of it is that life insurance should be checked on a regular basis. The beneficiaries should be checked on a regular basis, and make sure that everything is the way you want it to be. Because things change and life moves on, but a lot of times we don't adapt our mechanisms to protect family members and each other, and those things happen.
In most cases, the beneficiary designations are revocable, which means you can change them. So we, as a matter of our review meetings, we check those beneficiary designations once a year to make sure that they're current, because as the marriages and the divorces and the births and the deaths, and as life happens, sometimes that alters how you view your beneficiaries.
So that was kind of an extreme example of the lady in New York whose money went to the wrong person. But things can happen. Now, a lot of people feel very secure where they have a pension, and I guess unfortunately we see fewer and fewer people with good pensions. But if you have a pension, is that solid gold? Is that guaranteed? Or what could happen with that pension?
Well, a lot of times too, if the spouse dies, let's say the spouse of the breadwinner dies, you have to look on how that's going to impact your income, because the pension may not have a survivor benefit. Or there may be a pension with a partial survivor benefit. That may be a 50% survivor benefit. So we have to look and see what those survivor benefits look like. And then in addition to that, Social Security, of course, which we covered at length in prior shows, Barry, that with Social Security, that when a spouse dies, if the surviving spouse will inherit the larger Social Security benefit. So if, let's say, husband and wife, husband dies and his Social Security benefit was bigger than the wife's, then the wife will then keep the husband's Social Security benefit because that's bigger, but then she will lose hers. Mm-hmm. So if maybe the husband's was maybe $1,500 and hers was $1,000 a month, she's going to lose the $1,000 a month.
Well, I guess, I know we covered Social Security in fair detail in previous shows, but it's good, I guess, in terms of this what-if game that we're playing, because a lot of people, when they approach Social Security age, they don't really play that what-if game saying, well, what if I choose the wrong way to take my Social Security? How's that going to impact me, and how's that going to impact my family? So we'll be putting some contact information up on our Social Security seminars. If anybody really is, if you're getting close to that 60 year of age marker, the Social Security seminar really tells you how to maximize Social Security, how to take it the right way for you, the best way. And there's, as strange as it may seem, there's actually 81 ways for a married couple to apply for Social Security, and there's a lot of opportunity, missed opportunity there for people, and a lot of opportunity that our clients have benefited from. And people attending the seminar, it will be a very educational experience to attend.
So we do the Social Security workshops. We do them every month. We have them. We do them locally, right here in Pottstown. We do them right downtown at the brand new Lily's restaurant, which is right down on High Street, not too far from our office. Of course, we have an office right downtown in that big brick building there on the corner of High and Hanover, 152 East High Street. We're up on the 4th floor there. But anyway, the Social Security seminars are part of what we do, part of the public forum that we use to get the message out there about Social Security. Let's continue with this what if game, Barry, because we talked about the death of the primary breadwinner and the death of the death of the spouse, but there's some other important questions too. For example, what happens if your pension check is all of a sudden reduced by 20%? Well, how can that happen? Well, actually, it does happen. If you think about not so long ago, right here in Pottstown, Dana Corporation emerged from bankruptcy, and the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation was going to take over. Now, what's the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, you may ask? Well, that's the government agency that takes over when a corporation can't meet its pension obligations. So a lot of times, these corporations become bankrupt, and all of a sudden they can't write the pension check because the money that was initially set aside to meet those pension obligations, well, those assets were used to fund other obligations. So what happens is the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation comes in, and the word guarantee doesn't always mean 100%. So
right.
Sometimes you're getting pennies on the dollar. Now, in this case, Dana ultimately, emerged from bankruptcy, but that was a big, that made headline news.
Sure.
Because there's an awful lot of people in town here that are dependent upon a pension check from Dana. So ultimately that problem was resolved. But there are a lot of cases where that's not the case. And in the most recent downturn in the stock market several years ago, we saw a lot of stress on these pension funds because a lot of them were dependent upon growth in the stock market.
Right, and it's just something you have to be aware of and keep an eye on too. And I think what's happened, at least in the last few years, we're reading that some of these pension funds are doing better now. They're starting to catch up with their and grow their assets that they're more in line with their obligations. But it's not it's not something that's cast in stone. And again, it's one of the what ifs in a planning scenario. This kind of ties in with the planning. Like we kind of tend to look at things as they are instead of what they will be or might be down the road. And I know one of the things that's on the radar is the idea of inflation. And I know if you're viewing this and you're old enough to be aware of what was going on back in, say, the 80s, late 70s and 80s, you probably remember people talking about those CDs they used to be able to buy with a 12% rate of return or 10%.
Yeah.
How come you can't get any more of those CDs?
Well,
that seems like they would be a good buy.
Well, they were, but there's a problem that goes along with that, and that is that when you look at the return on a CD rate, a big component of that is the inflation rate. So what we're seeing right now is we're living in a very low interest rate environment, or I should say, we're living in a low inflation environment, which translates to a low interest rate environment. So what happens is, and what you're referring to, back in the late 70s and early 80s, we were really living in a time of double-digit inflation. But when you think about a pension, most pensions do not have inflation adjustments to them. Mm-hmm. So what you get the day that you walk out the door is what you're going to get for the rest of your life. And that can potentially be a problem if you don't account for it, because a lot of times, companies which have these large pension obligations, they're forcing people to retire early. So if let's say you're retired at age 60, you might have another 30 years of life. It's not uncommon to think that a 60-year-old is going to live to 90. So you might have another 30 years. Well, there could be a lot of inflation in that 30-year period of time.
Well, think back 20 years ago. What did you pay for a loaf of bread? What did you pay for a gallon of gas?
Yeah.
And we've had relatively tame inflation.
We've lived in it's been low inflation, but if you talk to people that are retired in particular, they are experiencing inflation with a lot of the food they buy. because if you think of the, food being, is a commodity and it's being shipped in, elsewhere, you can't grow strawberries, when there's snow on the ground. So you got to ship them in. So we're seeing a lot of inflation in the food, energy, also things like milk, drugs, prescription drugs, things of that nature. So to think that there's no inflation, that's kind of a misnomer. But the other thing that with Social Security checks, now there are cost of living adjustments, or what we call COLA adjustments on Social Security, but a lot of times that's not accounting for inflation. So,
is that diet cola or is that regular
yeah,
cola?
that's the regular stuff.
Regular stuff.
COLA, cost of living adjustment. Yes.
And it's interesting in talking to people. I find some people are just really nervous about whether Social Security is going to be there for them. These are people that we talk to maybe in their late 50s and early 60s, and they're worried about whether they're going to get Social Security. And what's your take on that? Is that something they should be worried about?
Well, I would say, I'm not a fatalist. I believe that the system will stay intact, and nothing's guaranteed. We don't have any guarantees here. But we're a big proponent of the doing the financial planning under the three-legged stool. We've talked in prior shows about the three-legged stool, where you're not only relying on your pension and your Social Security, but we're relying on getting some income from your nest egg as well. Okay, so I do believe that Social Security for those folks will be there in one way, shape, or form. I do think that it's such a huge obligation for our government that they simply can't ignore it, and they have to figure out a way for the system to work, that they can continue to produce those checks. But beyond that, if you're doing a well-rounded financial plan, you have to account for other sources of income beyond the Social Security check, and that would be. And when I talk to young people, that's what I tell them. You have to take control of your own destiny with respect to planning for your own retirement income.
That's good. That's good advice. I know. A big part of the value that you add to clients is to being able to look down the road 30 years ahead of time. Most of us have a hard enough time, seeing how we're going to get through the week or the month, let alone the year or the decade. But when you really do long-term planning, again, you want to handle those what ifs. What if bad things happen? What if good things happen? Or what if what's more likely, a lot of bad and a lot of good things are going to happen over a period of time, and you have to be flexible enough to deal with them. But you do have to do some planning and have some contingencies that are ready to go.
Yeah. Well, it's common and human nature to address the here and now. We have to take care of things today. But the fact of the matter is that people are living longer because of the evolution of man, so to speak, the evolution of healthcare and just awareness, people taking care of themselves, so on and so forth. I mean, a baby born today will have a life expectancy of 80 years for the first time in our history. So
that's actually misleading, because that's a baby born today.
It's a baby born today. If you make it to 65, you've already outlived a lot of the mortality that happens in that first 65 years. If you make it to 65, your life expectancy is about 23 years. Gets you to about 87, 88, somewhere in that range. So people are living longer. And those are averages, of course. And if you're taking care of yourself, you're going to live longer. If
you're a woman, you're going to live longer.
If you're a woman, you're going to live longer. If you don't smoke, you're going to live longer. If you follow diet and exercise, you're going to get. So there's all sorts of factors in there that could push you well into the 90s. So then the what if game, the what if question here is, well, what if you live to be 100?
And that kind of ties back in, and the whole concept of planning for income and how Social Security ties into it. Because again, as you mentioned, people who opt for Social Security, especially if they do it the right way, following our system of Social Security maximization, which, by the way, the Social Security office will give you no help when it comes to planning, but we do for people. And actually, people watching today, if you want a free Social Security maximization report, we can create one for you. We'll make that offer to our viewers, and it's free and there's no obligation. But that plays into it a lot, because we want, by making the right choice, if you're basically, the big risk when you're young is that you're going to die early. The big risk as we get into the 60s, 70s, and 80s is that we're not going to die early, that we're going to live longer and longer, and we don't want the income and the growth of that income to run dry while you're still here needing
Right.
to be lived.
No, that's a good point, because there is the flip side of covering the risk of dying too soon, which is, we talked about earlier, the life insurance and planning for the death early in the game, is, well, what happens if I live too long? Because there's also the fear of running out of money. What happens if I run out of money? You can't go get a job when you're 85 or 90. It just
maybe as a
doesn't work.
doorstop somewhere. They're just not going to hire you for anything where they expect you to be able to show up every day and be physically active.
And
it's
work.
just tough. Yeah.
It's so what we do is, and you have a building block here. You're building sources of income. If you have a pension, great. If you have everybody has Social Security, so we build that in. But then we want to build as many other guarantees into the plan as we can, because you don't know how long you're going to live, and really, 100 today is, like 20 years ago, almost no one lived to 100, right? There was almost no what do you call them?
Centenarians.
Is that right?
Centenarians.
And of course, Barry, you make always a statement at our workshops that what do you say about people
They're the fastest growing population, people over 100.
They're the fastest growing part of the population. They're not the fastest moving.
It's true.
But they're the fastest growing part of the population.
And all kidding aside, there are a lot of people out there that are going to be hitting age 100, and the time to plan for that is not at age 99.
Yeah.
If you're 50 or 60 years old, 70 years old, and you haven't planned for living a long time, it's time to have a good conversation about that, and I think employ some of these ideas. And a great place to start is to attend one of our seminars or call for a report.
Yeah. So we have just to get some resources out there. So we have a couple seminars coming up, and we showed the dates up on the screen. We're going to be right here in Pottstown, I believe, in the next couple of weeks. So just call our office or send me an email and order your tickets, and just come out and see the show, right? And then above and beyond that, that Social Security report, how to maximize your Social Security, that is a valuable report. And all you need to do is plug in a couple of numbers. Give us your Social Security statement, and we can give you a nice full analysis, which really helps you make that really critical Social Security decision. The other thing that I want to mention, Barry, when they introduced the show here, they have a video that we made a couple months ago out when we were out in Michigan, and we want to offer that too to folks, because we think that tells a little bit about who we are and what we do.
Yeah, it's a nice video, and it's really not I wouldn't say it's going to win an Academy Award this year. It's a 5-minute piece, but it kind of gets us talking about some of the things we've seen, some of the things that people appreciate about what we do, what we've learned by doing this for so many years. And between the two of us, we've been doing this for 30, 40 years. So you learn some things along the way. So yeah, it's a relative long time. We're not talking about the dinosaurs, but we kind of appeared right after the dinosaurs disappeared. But when you do something a long time, you get to know what works, and also you learn what doesn't. And you also learn that you have to keep learning, and there's always going to be something new tool available to you, and those are all things that are helpful.
Yep. Here's another question that I think is worth asking, and that is, what if one of your children fell on hard times? We see an awful lot of people in our practice that are helping their children in their 40s and their 50s.
The children are in the 40s and 50s.
Children are in their 40s and their 50s.
And that's tough. That's tough because we see our clients struggle with that, and they're watching their kids struggle. And I think what really gets them is they want to help, as much as they want to help their kids, they really want to help their grandchildren. And if their kids are having trouble, then they know their grandchildren are going to be having trouble. But it's a very tricky thing to navigate to help them if you can, but not to the point where you're going to bankrupt yourself and find yourself in need of help. Because if they need your help and you run out of money, they're not going to be in a position to help you down the road. Right. So this is something we struggle with, and certainly feel for every parent. When they look at their kids, they want them to do well. They want to be proud of them, and they know sometimes they're going to hit on hard times, whether it's through their own fault or not their own fault. And it's difficult. It's one of those what ifs, because what if they need help and if they don't, well then that's what you really want to happen. So that's something we help people work through that, and sometimes we use different trust instruments and things to set up so that it's done in a way that's helpful to the kids, but doesn't leave the parents destitute or really deprived because they help more than they really could handle.
Well, I think too a lot of people are so giving of themselves, and they're so used to, when they raise their children, it's like they're taking care of their children first before they're taking care of themselves. It's sort of a natural feeling to do that.
You know what it's like? It's like when you have kids, it's like living with a homeless person. They don't work. They're always asking you for money, and they always walk around saying, "Can I have something to eat? I'm hungry. I'm hungry." It's like, well, you get used to when you see your kids, your inclinations, you're reaching in your wallet to help them, whether it's with the schoolwork, with books, with things to do in sports. You're always helping your kids. And then it kind of gets at you. Now you're hitting the age of 50 or 60 yourself, and you're trying to make sure that you're secure in retirement, and you're seeing your kids are still needing that help. At an age when you would have hoped that they wouldn't. You kind of have to look at every situation individually.
Well, it's tough too because these are very trying times economically. I mean, people are losing their jobs. You see maybe people in their 30s and 40s that are losing their job. What do? You're all of a sudden one day you have a nice job where you're making a lot of money and you have nice benefits, and then the next day, you're one of several hundred or maybe several thousand that just got laid off, and it's not going to be easy to find another job because the job market is just so saturated with people looking for work. So then mom and dad come along and feel that they have to help out. Well, that puts a lot of stress on the system because mom and dad might be on a pretty tight financial plan themselves where they might not have those resources. So there's really a lot, and we've seen that. I think more in the last 5 to 10 years than we saw prior to that.
Yep. It's a natural inclination to give to your kids and your grandchildren when you just realize, a couple can look and says, look, we're not going to spend this money. We have more money coming in each month. It's just accumulating. Let's start giving some of it away. Let's help out the kids because they'll benefit from it, as opposed to a phone call saying, Joe just lost his job. We're going to lose the house. I mean, it can get pretty extreme pretty fast, especially when people live in a way where they're maybe taking on way more debt than they really would be smart to do.
Well, this has certainly been an interesting discussion today because I think we concentrated on, or we spent a lot of time talking about some of the negatives.
The parade of horribles.
Yeah, which, sometimes things aren't always so rosy. We like to think they are, and I think you and I are both positive people generally. But the fact of the matter is that when you're doing planning, we've always been big on protecting the downside. Well, what happens if this or what happens if that? So, living too long or not living long enough are questions. Taking care of your children. We didn't even get into long-term care and the risk that presents itself. That's probably a show unto itself, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, because there's been some changes in the long-term care industry over the last 3 to 5 years that really changed a lot in the way we talk about it with our clients. We have some very non-traditional and different ways of handling that risk that I think people find very interesting. We should do a good show on new alternatives to protecting
long-term care.
Against long-term care.
I think we will, Barry. So on that note, we're going to put a wrap on today's show, the latest on Financially Speaking, and when we get together the next time, we'll have another topic that we'll talk about and hopefully provide some good information to our viewers out there. And I think on that note, we'll say so long. And on behalf of my partner, Barry, we'll see you next time.
Happy trails to you till we meet.